Captain Elena Ross did not wait for permission, because waiting meant death, and 540 Marines were stuck in a deep canyon in enemy territory, surrounded by hills crawling with fighters, with smoke rising from 2 burning trucks and radio signals fading fast as the sun beat down on their helmets, and command back at the base said, "Stand by," which really meant, "We don't know what to do." And Elena had heard that before, too many times, and she remembered the last time she waited for orders. Fallujah, 2017, when she sat on the runway waiting for clearance, and by the time it came, 2 of her closest friends were already zipped in black bags, and that pain never left. So today, as soon as she heard the call, "Mayday, Mayday," taking fire from the ridge, "We're boxed in," she sprinted across the tarmac toward her A-10 Warthog, ignoring the shouts from the ground crew, dodging the paperwork that said she needed a general's approval, because no approval was coming, just excuses and delay, and she wasn't built for that. Not when good people were dying. So when the sergeant at the ladder shouted, "Captain, this is out of line," she just yelled, "So is letting 540 men die," and threw herself into the cockpit, pulled the canopy shut, flipped on the switches with trained fingers, engines screaming alive, dust swirling, and her heart pounded, but her hands stayed steady as she whispered the Lord's Prayer under her breath, not because she was holy, but because she needed every ounce of strength to face what was coming. And as her jet rolled forward, the control tower came alive in her earpiece. "Ross, this is command. Abort immediately. You do not have clearance." But she unplugged the headset and left it swinging on the dash, eyes locked on the canyons beyond the horizon where men were bleeding, trapped, sending last prayers into radios that were now mostly static, and her jet soared into the sky like a steel bird on fire, skimming the edge of protocol, heading straight toward war, because Elena didn't fly for medals, didn't fly for praise. She flew to save lives. And the second she cleared the base perimeter, her radar lit up with threats, enemy trucks, anti-aircraft batteries on hilltops, heat signatures crawling toward the Marines from the east, and she dropped low, just above the rocks, using the terrain to hide from enemy scans. And when she reached the ridge, she saw it all. Marines huddled in the dry riverbed, some firing, some dragging the wounded. One man waving a red flare, bullets kicking up sand inches from his feet, and enemy vehicles moving in from both sides. And she didn't wait, didn't blink, didn't breathe, just pulled the trigger, and the G8 Avenger cannon beneath her roared to life, sending 30mm rounds tearing into trucks, ripping through engines and doors, men diving for cover as the ground exploded, black smoke rising fast, screams lost in the sound of thunder and flame. And she circled again, laying fire on the second wave of fighters with RPGs, cutting them down before they could reach the line. And still her radar blinked. More enemy forces inbound, 5 trucks, a tank, 2 drones circling above, and her fuel gauge ticked lower. But she stayed, teeth clenched, eyes locked, because if she left now, if she turned back to refuel, it would be over, and she wouldn't do that. So she hit the last of her payload. 2 smart bombs guided into the pass where the tank rolled forward, and the blast sent dust 100 feet into the air, burying half the road, stopping the convoy. And she screamed, "Come on," into an empty cockpit, sweat pouring down her back, smoke smearing the windows. And then she saw it, a downed medevac bird in the open, 5 Marines pinned behind it, using broken guns to hold the line, and enemy fighters crawling closer with blades in hand. And she dove so low the mountains scraped her wing, cut across the canyon like a shadow, and fired one last burst that sent bodies flying and saved the last 5 from being overrun. And finally, after 21 minutes of fire and flight, the field went quiet, and the radios lit up with cheers and cries. "She's here. She's still here. An angel in the sky. That's Ross." And she hovered above them as long as her tank allowed, just in case, until the Black Hawks arrived and started pulling the wounded. And only then did she turn home, her gauges red, her cabin hot, her arms burning. And as she landed, the entire runway was lined with officers, MPs, commanders, all waiting for her. And a colonel stepped forward, arms crossed, voice sharp, and barked, "Captain Ross, You have violated direct orders. You are under review for insubordination and unauthorized combat action." And she looked him in the eye and said, "I'd rather be court-martialed than carry 540 folded flags." And just as he opened his mouth to answer, a voice shouted from the crowd, "Let her speak." And a Marine stepped forward, face bruised, arm in a sling, boots caked in blood, and saluted her, then said, "She saved my brothers. She saved me." And another Marine followed, and another, and soon the survivors filled the tarmac, every one of them standing tall despite pain, despite wounds. And the colonel said nothing more, just stepped aside as General Michael Hands, for stars and silver hair, approached slow, quiet, stopped before Elena, and asked one question. "Did you disobey a direct order, Captain Ross?" And she said, "Yes, sir," her voice like steel. And he looked at her, then turned to the crowd of soldiers and said, "And did she save all your lives?" And the shout of "yes" came like thunder. And he nodded once, then raised his hand in salute, not out of protocol, but respect, and said, "Then I salute the bravest damn pilot this country has." And the next day, every news channel in the nation ran the headline, "Hero pilot saves 540, breaks orders, saves battalion." And while officials debated punishment, the people made their voice clear, and veterans marched in her name, and Gold Star families wrote letters of thanks, and Congress overruled the charges, and awarded her the Medal of Honor, first female A-10 pilot to ever receive it. And when she gave her speech, she said only 9 words, "Sometimes saving lives means breaking rules that kill," and stepped away as the crowd stood for 10 full minutes, clapping until their hands went numb. And after that, Elena Ross didn't chase fame, didn't write a book, didn't do talk shows. She returned to base, flew her missions, trained new pilots. And every year on the same date, the 540 survivors sent her one message, just 3 words, always the same, still breathing, "Thanks." And when she finally retired, the airfield was silent, flags at half-mast, and on the runway stood 540 men and women in dress blues, lined up shoulder to shoulder. And when she walked between them, each one saluted, and many had tears in their eyes, because they weren't just soldiers. She made sure they stayed sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, and friends. And as she walked past the last man, a boy who was just 19 when she saved him, he stepped forward and placed in her hand a small stone from the canyon, wrapped in a bandage, and said, "This was the first thing I touched after you came." And she held it like gold, smiled softly, and for the first time in years, said nothing at all.